Good evening, welcome to tonight's Monday Live. As you'll see, it is just me in some very bright clothes. No Stu today, he's off on a trip, so hopefully having a great time abroad. And yeah, weather here in sunny old England's apparently warmer than Barbados. Unbelievable. Poor courses are getting burnt out and the green stuff tearing their hair out, but other than that, it's lovely to be out in the sun. So I hope you're managing to get some good golf at the moment. And to those that have joined us, thank you for joining us, or me. James and me. James is managing the cameras and he has a microphone on as well, so you never know, you might even hear him at some point tonight. But very brief roundup of this week's golf. Pot guy to winning in the States, 5-hole playoff, and Chris Kirk having an amazing, really stable week and then 3-putting during the playoff, but Aldrich pot guy to getting over the line, the big hitting South African, longest hitter on tour, where he was at the Titleist Performance Institute at Woburn a few weeks back when I was up there, and some seriously impressive numbers for him. They're actually poring over his data, looking at areas that he could improve, and obviously off the tee, really good, but approach play needed a bit of work, and was looking at different spin profiles. I think it's really fascinating to see the depths that they've gone into, and clearly it has paid dividends this weekend, just gone. So great result for him. And Adrian Sandier winning in Europe this week, the Italian Open, a Frenchman winning there. So that course looked pretty brutal. Just thick bundu offline and firm fast fairways made for a pretty interesting tournament. So that's the main tour events that's gone on. We're going to flick very quickly to the questions. I was noticing, thankfully there are quite a few that have come in. A couple of minutes ago I was looking at them going, I'm on my own tonight. I'm going to stand here talking about absolutely nothing for hopefully as much of an hour, but thank you for the questions that have come through. So I'm going to start off. John Puckett, fastest finger first. First question in. I love the show. I have a tendency to hit the ball 7 to 10 millimeters vertical on the face with driver. My horizontal strike's usually 2-toe to 2-heel. Is this a shaft, ball position, delivery, or swing weight issue? And the answer is definitely maybe. It could be any one of those. Realistically, if you're struggling for consistency of strike, then obviously that could be a delivery pattern thing. That could always be the soft bit on the end of the shaft, the bit holding it. But normally, if someone's struggling for consistency of contact, I'd be looking at the club and the player are out of sync. So you're not arriving, the club is not arriving with you as you get to the ball. Now, ultimately, it could be, say, pretty much any number of things. It could be a total weight thing, so kind of dead weight of the shaft. It could be a balance point / swing weight issue that you're having to feed the club onto the back of the ball. Unfortunately, without having you here and looking at you and analysing how your club's set up and how you move it, I actually just can't give you an answer because there are too many things that could be causing a variable strike. But the answer is one or more of the points you've made, but sadly, there's just no way to tell you without seeing you, I'm afraid. Leo Bienek, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Hi Simon, what are your thoughts on the Mizuno S3 irons? Also have a whiteboard 73X, but can sometimes hook it. Would a Ventus Black 7X be better option? So starting with the S3 irons, I actually just fitted a set of those today. Just a beautiful single piece forged iron. They're not far off a blade. There's a little bit of progression to the weight in the height of the weight in the back. And essentially, they're kind of like the JPX Tour irons, but slightly stepped back. Really nice soft feel, really kind of neutral launch angle, but they retain a little bit of spin. So if you're looking to mid-launch, but keep some spin on the ball and keep some flight up there without much forgiveness, they're a lovely, lovely head. Really good from a ball striking point of view. If you're a good ball striker, want maximum feedback, lovely, but you're not getting any forgiveness. Regarding the driver shaft, the whiteboard, the new version of the whiteboard, assuming it's the current Diamond whiteboard shaft, does swing a little bit lighter, so the dead weight's lower 70s, whereas something like the Ventus Black is in the 77, 78 gram category. So if it's too light in the bottom end, of which the whiteboard is not a massively tip-heavy shaft this year, or if it's a little light total weight and you're just flipping it over, then yeah, in principle, Ventus Black may well be that little bit better. Certainly from a stability point of view, they're both really stable through the tip, but there's a bit more to hit against in the bottom end and total weight with the Ventus Black. So worth a comparison if you can do. Simon Muggleton, some help. Well, fingers crossed, hopefully I can provide. Last month I started to have a flat bowed left wrist and I'm struggling with height. I'm assuming you mean flight height rather than kind of dropping into the ball. And what's the best way / drill to get a slight cup on my left wrist? I'm assuming wrist rather than left right. I feel way too laid off, if that helps. I mean, this is very much one for Stuart. So this would be more about a technique thing. From a club standpoint, if the club's heavy, it can drag the club behind you and get it flatter and get the wrist bowing over. It sounds on face value more of a swing plane thing. By that, I mean that if the club's getting a little bit on a flatter plane as you rotate, it's going to tend it round, and that's more likely to get your wrist bowing. It's hard, unless you're Dustin Johnson and massively flexible, if the pitch of swing is more upright, then to get that and a bowed wrist, you need a huge flexibility in that wrist. So chances are your rotation, the plane of your swing is a little bit flat. And you say, I am not a coach, but my instinct would be the more you can get the pitch of the shaft upwards, the easier it is to get that left wrist more towards kind of the cupped side of things. And the flatter it is, the more likely you are to bow it. So speak to a coach for certain, but swing plane would be one of the first things I would go to and focusing on picking that club up a little steeper in the backswing. But I'm not a coach. Find a coach just to validate that that's the right thing to do for you. John Burton, I'm buying a GT1 driver. If it turns out to be too light, is it simply a matter of changing the back weight to a heavier one? What about other variables like swing weight and shaft length? So the GT1 is designed to be a lighter weight head. It's designed to flight a little bit higher, and so you can use a heavier weight. You can go up to the gold weight in the back, which is a +6 gram, and that gets you close to the standard weight of a GT2, but with the weight further back in the head. So as long as getting it to the standard weight of a GT2 is enough weight, then that will absolutely work, but it will increase a little bit of launch, it will increase a little bit of spin. So if you're looking for a higher flight and a mid-spin flight, then that would be one way of getting there, but you are limited on how much extra you can put in. Obviously the GT2 starts that bit heavier, and then you can add another 6 grams on top of that. So the length and swing weight side of things, the GT1s are designed to be built a little bit longer. The standard length is slightly longer, and then the lighter head weight stops the swing weight getting heavy. So it's really about finding, we generally don't fit over 45 inches because strike suffers, and actually being in play, it's harder to control the face. So the longer it gets, the more rotation you tend to create, or the shaft can drop and get out of plane, out of sync with the player more easily. So reason on tour, average shaft length is under 45 inches, or it's just about creeping to 45 now, is that they want to hit the fairways. So shorter is easier to control. Therefore, the GT1, chances are you'll need to add a little bit of weight to build it. If you wanted to go that bit shorter, 45 or a hair less, then you'll need to add a bit of weight to keep feel of the head. But swing weight really is about finding what suits you. There is no magic number that you kind of say, right, I'm that in a 6-iron that's going to track across all my clubs. It just doesn't work that way. But be mindful, if you're going shorter, you will need that extra head weight. And then depending on what weight you need, it might be a GT2 that's easier to get it there for the Titleist models, depending on what flight. And probably there are so many extra layers of depending on, but it is doable with the GT1. Hope that actually helped. Chris Champion, happy Monday, Simon, or happy Monday to you too. Can you please compare flex, weight, balance, bend profile, etc. of the Project X60 to a Modus 115X and hit each in the head of your choice? Many thanks from Michigan, USA. Well, welcome to Monday afternoon in Michigan. I'm just going to grab a head and those 2 shafts. I'll be back very shortly.
Well, I just mentioned we've got a bit of grumbling audio coming through. Actually, what I'm going to do, let me just restart if you don't mind waiting, guys, I'm just going to restart the audio deck so it stops the grumbling. Okay, hopefully that's fixed it.
Okay, right. So to kind of go over the couple of shafts, I mean, the Project X, make sure I picked up the right ones, Project X 60, yeah, Modus 115X. So Modus 115 and an X is up around the 120 gram mark, and Project X 60 is 120, 122 grams, so similar dead weight. The Project X is really kind of very, very stable through that midsection. And so it's designed not to be overly tip stiff, but very, very stable in that sort of upper midsection. So it's a very tight, strong feeling shaft. It's got a little bit of a wider diameter as a result to give it kind of hoop strength and resist overling, resist load. So stronger in that upper half of the shaft. The 115 is, again, stable in the midsection, but slightly more responsive tip. So if you take Modus 120s, softer handle, stiffer tip, this is almost the other way around. So, you know, stable in that upper midsection, softer in the tip. So not overly dissimilar, but the Modus as a shaft isn't designed to be quite, in theory, quite as low spin as a Project X. The Project X is really, you know, was originally designed as a real hitter shaft. Kim Braley designing it, and Mickelson's in a lot of his thoughts for shafts, but Project X was, you know, certainly one of the kind of the more stout profiles. So in terms of looking at, you know, I mean, flex, if you were to do it on a frequency meter, they probably wouldn't be overly dissimilar, but the only thing with frequency is it can give a slightly false reading depending on the zonal stiffness. So Modus 120, as I said, is softer handle, stiff tip. Actually, it's a very stable shaft, but frequency is very soft because of the handle softness, which is the bit that a frequency test measures is the butt stiffness. So the Project X will still play a little bit tighter, probably in principle about a half a flex stiffer, but it's going to feel quite a bit tighter. We'll come on to that when I hit it. In terms of bend profile, not wildly dissimilar, but the Project X is a little more stout in the upper midsection here. I'm just checking to make sure the balance point. So I'll describe that when I'm hitting, but generally speaking, the Project X is like to feel a little bit heavier, but I'll go over that when I strike it. So I'm going to get a little bit of data with each of these. I've decided to go with, just because I play Mirror, to go with the MC502, just because it's very pretty. And I fancy hitting it. So, so Project X6s, these are both heavier than I play by about 7 or 8 grams. So for me, a kind of fairly hard work swinging. But with the Project X here, it just, you know, it's something that, you know, we all do kind of waggle tests and things, but you can feel there's very little motion up here. So it's something that you really feel like you've got to work to get the result out of. So something that really feels like it hangs on. It's a very tight, crisp feeling shaft, which for some players is going to feel great because it doesn't feel like it gets away from you. Others, it's going to feel like it gives you nothing back. So you've really got to feel, you know, to get that little bit of a snap off of it, I've got to really kind of load it and hit at it. So I can't quieten that down, but if I give it an absolute battering, I can get something from it. Fairly neutral balance point. It's not overly tip heavy, but there's a bit to swing against in the bottom end. So if we go on to Modus 115, this is the irony. The 115 is more of a 120 gram, and the 120 is more of a 115 gram. So sort of irony about how they set up. Pickup is it's interesting. There's a little bit more play in the shaft, a little bit, certainly in the very top end, but balance point's not overly dissimilar, and I expect this to feel a bit smoother. Yeah, so you can certainly feel that tip kick a little bit more, gives a bit more pop. It's not quite as hard work to swing. You know, the Project X is just a hair, feels and plays just a hair heavier, but you certainly get a little bit more kick from this shaft. So if you want something that's fairly stable in the middle but gives a little bit extra back, versus the Project X, the Modus 115 just gives you a little bit more snap in the bottom end. Might feel a bit easier to flight, certainly feels like you can time it rather than have to hit at it, whereas the Project X will kind of cling on for grim death, and you can batter it and it's going to hold on really tight for you. So hope that kind of helps. But swing-wise, they both swing pretty darn similarly in terms of balance point, and it's more the responsiveness of the shaft where it feels different. So hope that helps. Ooh, I just dropped out of the page I want. There we go. The left rough, good afternoon to you. How does the KBS dollar taper 110 compare against the KBS Tour 110? Do they have similar tip stiffness to the Modus 105? Looking at ZXi 7 heads, but trying to keep swing weight to D2. And I think ZXi 7 heads way more than the i230. So the Strixons this year are a little bit heavier than they have been in the past. The i230s, because of the toe weight, you can grade that head weight back a little bit more easily. So the natural swing weight of the Strixons is going to be higher than the pings, but you've got the function of the pings to make them heavier and lighter through the external weight rather than having to use internal weighting. So the dollar taper is designed for a slightly lower spin than the KBS Tour. The KBS Tour has a more responsive tip. It's designed to kick it a little bit higher launch. A fairly moderate spin. It's sort of mid-spin in theory. The dollar taper is a little lower spin. Dollar taper is going to hang on a bit tighter, and actually is a couple of grams lighter in the 110. Certainly swings just a touch lighter as well. So that would help your swing weight in the Strixons. And that shaft in the Strixon heads would be the lower spinning option of all of those. The i230 will flight it a bit more, spin it a little bit more. So, yeah, and ball speed ZXi, oh, you're talking ZXi 7s, yeah, ignore, I was going to talk about ZXi 5s, but that's irrelevant. ZXi 7 will spin a bit less than the 230 and launch a little bit lower as well. Similar tip stiffness to the Modus 105 stiff. I would say the dollar taper is closer to it. The Modus 105 is actually quite stiff tip, but you get response from the upper section. The KBS Tour 110, you'll get the response from the tip, not from the upper half. So kind of similar to that Modus 115 where the tip kicks a little bit, but definitely higher flight from just a little bit from the KBS 110 versus the dollar taper. Hope that wasn't too many KBSs in one sentence. Ian Murgatroyd, I need a 7-wood / hybrid that doesn't go to the moon, but isn't so low that it doesn't stop on greens. Help. So it's an interesting one. Yeah, 7-woods are just going to flight high. So if you're looking for maximum flight, then the 7-wood will give you that, but it doesn't sound like you are. I mean, it could be that this is somewhere that the utility wood that Callaway will be bringing out where that next generation sits. They're sort of interesting to test because you've got to have a separate shaft system for that one club because it's a wood shaft in a hybrid. So the smaller tip is what goes into that head. But as a head, it's more wood-like from a spin point of view, but then hybrid-like from a size point of view. And the smaller head keeps the launch down, and the wood style keeps the spin up a little bit. So that could work for you. Potentially also the Cobras, the DS adapter, a good sort of mid-spin, slightly on the stronger side, but mid-spin, pretty versatile. The Strixon heads also retain a little bit of spin in the hybrids too. So those will keep the launch lower than a 7-wood, but will keep that little bit of spin. So those are worth considering for certain. Sculpture X2, evening. Ball suggestion for 97-mile-an-hour driver swing, please. Do I need sub-60 compression or a bit higher? Now, interesting you should say that because there's a video that I've done recently which will be coming out soon. The answer is at that speed, that a soft compression ball won't necessarily give you more ball speed. So done a test on this. There's a video coming out shortly. Ball speed-wise, actually the less the ball compresses, the more ball speed you get. And until you're really extreme on ball speed, on club speed, they're actually, ball speed-wise, is 0 gain from a soft core ball. Yes, that's correct. Done a test on it, and actually the physics of it makes sense. The more you load a ball, the more it deforms, the more energy it's losing through heat and sound. And actually what a golf ball doesn't do, it doesn't load up and kick and create speed. If it loads less, it squashes less, and it takes less time to get its shape back, and therefore the flight is more stable. So the one element of it is that sometimes if you under compress a core, you're not getting the low spin that the core compression requires for the driver. So it's not ball speed you lose, but you might lose a bit of spin efficiency. A softer core will also, if it squashes more in the face, the cover doesn't grip as much, therefore you get a little less side spin. So if you shape the ball a lot, a softer compression ball can help with the straightness, and as a result of that can help with distance. But don't go to a softer core ball if just purely because you think it's going to give you more ball speed. It won't. Mr. Titleist, good evening, Simon. Any thoughts on the new Titleist irons? I see the T200 irons are no more and now seem to be T250. Thank you. So I can't actually officially comment on this for another week or so, actually in principle till the 10th, because that is when the embargo lifts. You're correct on the T200 becoming the T250, and I do have plenty of thoughts on them, but I can't officially talk about them on any outward channel yet, which is a bit of a shame. But no, they are nice. I think it's a fairly organic progression on previous models, and the primary focus is a bit more flight in the long irons, particularly in the 100, 150, but refined shapes. They've developed the tech that's in them, but yeah, as to any of the details, unfortunately, I can't say anything quite yet. Very pretty though. They've neatened up the head shapes a little bit, and I think particularly in the driving irons, the U505 is a neater head shape, and I think a lot of people are like that. That's about all I can say. Stuart Brister, how are you, Stuart? Nice to hear from you. I'm very well, thank you very much. He asked, hope you're well. Thinking of getting a GT 280, do you get the shaft that matches the driver or 3-wood in this club? So the 280 is more of a 2-wood. So Titleist have come out and said this is not designed to be a mini driver. It is a kind of it's a oversized fairway wood. So it's not designed to be super low spin. And as a result, it's likely to orient more towards your 3-wood than your driver. For me, whenever I've tested the minis or the 2-woods, the shaft that's worked for me is sat halfway between, because the length sits partway between. It's longer than a standard 3-wood, or I would be playing it longer than a standard 3-wood. Then I've gone into a 70-gram shaft. I'm in a 77 in the driver and a 64 in the driver, 77 in 3-wood. If I were playing it at 3-wood length, then I may well go closer to my 3-wood shaft. But whenever I've tested them, yeah, it's literally sat right in the middle. That probably doesn't help you. But ultimately, it's a case of testing them and seeing, relative to how you want to play it, what weight suits most. But if it's sitting in the standard length at sort of 43.5, 43.75, then chances are a little bit of a hybrid, but erring more towards fairway for that, I would say. Ian Linfoot, apologies if this is definitely maybe answer. Oh, you know me too well. If a player has a 2-way driver miss, what would happen if they put a lighter back weight in a 430 max driver, 94 driver speed? So what we have seen, really good question that. What we have seen is where drivers have got heavier in the back to get more forgiveness, for a lot of players, particularly if in transition, as I do, I get a little bit dropped and open the face. The further you're putting weight back, that weight actually can pull the face more open. So we've seen for a lot of players, that super forgiving back-weighted, 10K style weighting and setup to the head can actually make it harder to square it up. So for me, I have to play a weight forward head to not have to flip it back closed. So a lighter back weight in the 430 max will reduce swing weight. So that's one thing to be mindful of, but you'd have to be reducing weight by a good 5 to 10 grams. So i.e. probably putting some weight further forward on the head. Now you can do that, that's some lead tape on the sole. You can do it with hot melt, but that risks getting it on the face and then killing the head completely. But you need to remove 5 to 10 grams and reposition some of that forward to have the full effect without losing feel for the club head. So it's about complete weight distribution, but very good point. Actually, for a lot of players, heavy back means it's hard to square the face up and then you're going to hit it everywhere. So we are seeing with, say, the QI35 or one of the Callaway heads, the Cobra heads, actually we take the kind of the core model head and move the weight forward, and actually it makes it easier for some players to square the face up. So really good point. David Talon, hi Simon, have been watching your content on grip weight. I've been fit for clubs and swinger weight, and having been fit for clubs and swing weight, would using Arcos or shot scope tags on the end of grips change swing weight? Sorry, yes, so in case my mind and mouth were out of sync, basically having been fit for clubs and grip weight, would adding the Arcos sensors in the back change them. So technically, yeah, they are a little heavier. But the shot scope are really light. They're the small plastic. I'll see if I've got one on the top. I don't think I do. Oh, yeah, here we go. So, which are something like that. Now, the dead weight of this is a few grams. So that little, no problem at all. And actually, the original Arcos that you screw in, they're 7 or 8 grams. So they do add dead weight to the club. But because they sit in the butt end of the club above where you grip it, it has the minimum effect. So they will change it very slightly, but those ones, the lighter you can get them, the better, which is where, when they're this light, they're the best ones, in my opinion, from a club setup point of view. There will be a very slight impact, but hopefully not very much. And as long as with the Arcos, the ones that are kind of that deep that screw into the top of the grip, as long as you grip the grip of the club and don't go up onto the Arcos bit, you should be fine. But pretty minimal for those, but the best ones are the lightest, which would be these ones. Tony Bythway, hi Tony. I played steel fiber 110 in my irons and Ventus red in my woods, and all goes well. Could you recommend a hybrid shaft, please, that blends with these from a feel and a load perspective? So the I-110s are fairly stable. The red's got a bit of response. I would say be looking at kind of 70 to 80 grams. You could, if you wanted something with a bit of kick to spin it and flight it a bit more, the new Velocore Plus, the red 7 hybrid, that's got a softer tip, will retain a bit of spin. That's going to match well to the fairway shaft. Otherwise, if you want something a little bit more stout of that weight, let's think through. Don't want to go overly tip heavy into that. Potentially, you might sit a bit, I was going to say the Fuji Pro Blue 70, that might sit a bit like the 80, could just tip slightly heavy. But it's that kind of profile. It's a neutral balance, a little bit of response. Those two, I mean, the natural one would be the Ventus Red to match the fairway woods. That would give you the most consistency. The blue, if you wanted to bring spin down, will play a little more stout, but it's not a harsh feeling shaft. But yeah, the Ventus Red in the 77 odd gram in the 7, that should match in well. Tom Ashmore, good evening. Simon, good evening. Tom, if you have properly fitted a set of clubs, should most clubs go roughly the same peak height? I am seeing a much flatter flight compared to wedges and woods, thanks. So generally speaking, through a set of irons, peak height does stay pretty much the same. You know, a lot of people talk about 90 feet being a kind of marker point. Yeah, generally speaking, through the irons, and the thing is, some players will have slightly different deliveries. If you're completely orthodox all the way through the bag with your delivery and flight, then yeah, pretty similar peak height. Having said that, you know, something like a driver could feasibly peak quite a lot higher. You know, wedges may peak slightly higher. You'd normally find ball speed dropping off would mean that the peak height doesn't really kick up too much, but at the far ends of the set, always dependent on your delivery, yeah, there could be some slight peaks either end of the set, but pretty similar all the way through. So if there are big discrepancies, then there might be something interesting. If there are, send me the shot data, I'll have a little look and just see if there's anything that kind of stands out. Golf Nerd 3, why does it seem routine for players to tip Ventus shafts on their drivers? I thought you said tipping makes it weaker. So tipping does make it weaker. I think a lot of the time, certainly for a lot of the tour players, it's a habit that they get into. You know, maybe they actually want it softer. Maybe they want more response, but there is a really standard practice to tip a shaft half an inch or an inch. Sometimes it's just what the player wants. But ultimately, yeah, for the Ventuses, if we wanted to soften them a bit, we'd be tipping them. And so something that, you know, independently tested by the guys at Cool Clubs using the S3 machine, they've tipped them, frequented them, measured them, you know, assessed them, you know, put them through, and it softens them off because you're removing some of the Velocore material. So I think it's just something which is a tick box thing, which a lot of the tour players like done, and it's a habit. If it's not done, are they going to question it? So is it better to do it? So there's a bit of a mental thing going on there. For me, it doesn't make sense to me because you're using that shaft or that series of shafts for the specifics of the Velocore material. Yeah, I can only surmise that it's something that he's done because it's what the player has always had, and therefore just keep doing it. It's easier that way. Sam J, hi Simon. While teeing up on a shot with my 8-iron, the shaft broke on the grip end. It's a 3-year-old modus. Ribbed, assuming stepped steel. I noticed some rust inside the inner shaft. Could that cause it, or a defect? If it's 3 years old, it's not a defect, because a defect would go within the first few rounds. Especially something like a steel, there's a lot of force that goes through them, and ultimately, yeah, a defect in any shaft, graphite, steel, any of the composites, the shaft's going to break pretty early in its life because it would just weaken too quickly. Especially if you think how many shots 3-3 as you've hit, striking the ground, there's a lot of force going through that. So defect-wise, no. It is one of the two places that you're most likely to see a breakage. You know, the two places are right down the bottom, the thinnest part of the shaft, weakest part of the shaft. But at the top, we see that quite a bit where your hands are on the club, because at impact, that right end, that's where all the force is going. So when the club head stops a little bit of impact, the handle keeps going. That's why there can be one of the places it goes. However, yeah, if it's got a little bit of rust in, if it's got some moisture in, it's got a bit of rust in, then yeah, that degrades it. That will create a weakness, and then it can break. So it's just something that, you know, all golfers need to be careful of when you play in the wet. Just take them out of the bag, dry them out at home, just let them air dry, and that will mitigate that happening as much as possible. But it is one of the places shafts can break. It's unfortunate we don't see it very often anymore, but it can happen in the grip end and right down the tip end, more likely than anywhere else. Pro 1 David, hola from the Malmenor Golf in Spain. Liked your video on grip sizes. I'm thinking of changing from Golf Pride multi-compound +4 standard to CP2 wrap standard. Will this affect the swing weight? Thank you. Very little, very similar grip weights. The CP2 wrap, yeah, CP2 wrap are sort of 52 grams and a +4 sort of 53, 54. So very, very little. CP2s won't be quite as big in the bottom hand, but that's sort of softer, tacky material, really good grip. But no, if they're, you know, standard size to standard size, you'd be very unlucky unless it's a specifically light grip like some of the winds that they do. You'd be unlucky for it to make a major change. The only time it can do is if you go from a grip with very little grip cap at the end, and by that I mean where the shaft butts up to and then the cap on the top. Something like a multi-compound, there can be some where the two materials bonded together, they can have a slightly taller section at the top, but the grip weights are very, very consistent with those, so you know, shouldn't affect it negatively at all. Tony Bythway, hi again. While I like my steel fibers, if I wanted more flight descent angle, is there another graphite iron shaft you would recommend? I mean, at that weight, it's not going to have a massive effect on it. At that kind of 110 level, a lot of them will change the balance a lot, and that's the only kind of hesitation. Something, you know, principles, something like let me think at that weight. I mean, the Sinisters at that weight, but are designed to bring spin down a bit. The TZIs are sort of 95 and 105. May have a bit more response than the tip, but unlikely to change spin very much. It's either like, you know, your best bet is actually the ball type from a spin point of view, or a slight tweak in loft if you're looking to get a little bit more spin. But ball type will have the most effect on it. So between, you take a Strixon Z-Star XV, Z-Star Diamond, the XV Diamond, Z-Star Diamond. The Diamond spins more with irons and is a fairly low spin ball with the woods and driver. So if you just wanted iron spin to increase, that's a good ball to go to, and can be as much as sort of 800-900 revs versus a standard Pro V1. So you can get some really big differentials with the ball without having to manipulate the equipment to try and compensate for it. If they're working well and you just want more spin, I would look to the ball as the first bet. But it will chipping and putting feel will change, which is the compromise. But if it gets a much better ball flight with irons, then it should be something you can dial in pretty quickly. And I know you practice a lot, Tony, so you dial it in quickly. Golf Nerd 3 R28. I don't know whether that was up to. Are wood/hybrid heads 0.355 or 0.37 specific? Let's say I wanted to use a KBS Tour hybrid, which is 0.37. Will it work in all heads? Most heads are 0.370, which is a parallel tip, because that's what most hybrid shafts are. Now, there are a couple. The GT1 is a 355 tip. I was trying to think if there are any others at the moment that are 355, but most are 370. So, you know, if you get a shaft which is a 355, it's rare in hybrids now, then you can shim it to fill it out. But 99% of the heads are 370. I think the GT1 off the top of my head is the only one I can think of the mainstream ones, which is a 355. So yeah, pretty much everything else, no issues at all. But because they use as stock, you know, you might be able to get a 370 sleeve to work in it. That would be something I'd have to double check with the workshop guys. Certainly for Titleist stock shafts, they use a softer tip shaft in the MMT 50s and 40s to get a little bit more flight and spin. So that's why they go down to 355, because they also don't want anyone sort of linishing them down because they're too thin already. But yeah, most of the 370s. Sculpture X2, thanks for the ball answer. Currently TaylorMade Tour Response, so hopefully in the right ballpark. Yeah, Tour Response is a really good all-round ball in that it's got a less kind of stiff, for want of a better phrase, a less high compression core, but you've still got the urethane cover, which gets you some spin control with short irons and wedges. So it kind of fits in a nice middle ground all round. But yeah, so certainly a good all-round golf ball. Chris Champion, thanks Simon, I've been a Project X 6.5 and 6.0 player for years. I've been testing Modus 115X. I agree with exactly what you mentioned. To me, the Modus feels like a smoother Project X 6.0. Yeah, a little bit more flight, just leads less hard work. And if you played a Project X 6.5, you know what hard work feels like. The left rough, for someone that likes the stability of hazardous black Gen 4/5 60 6.0 in the driver. I've played 6.0 Project X irons, but like to go to 110 weight if that's any indication of balance, feel, preference. I'm assuming you want a driver shaft. I'm just going to, let me just check back to your previous questions to make sure there isn't anything. Okay, if that relates to the dollar taper KBS Tour question, then you're going to prefer the dollar taper feel because it's a little bit tighter. But if that isn't the right answer to the question you wanted, just let me know and I'll answer it correctly. Van House, hi Simon, is there much difference profile-wise between the Graphic Design VF and the whiteboard/blue board? So the VF is more whiteboard-like. VF is designed for very stiff tip. It's a lower launch, lower spin shaft. It swings fairly tip heavy. It's kind of like the old school whiteboard from a swing point of view in that you have to kind of fetch the bottom end a little bit. Blue board is really tight in the tip and the grip end, but has kick through the midsection. So if you want something that feels nice and tight at impact, but gives you a bit of kickback through the middle, blue board's great. And we've done really well with that this year, but it's going to swing less head heavy than the VF. The VF gives you more to hit against in the bottom end. Blue board's really neutrally balanced. It's a really mid balance point. Bit of kick in the middle, very really stout kind of low torque feel in the tip. Whiteboard, again, similar, very stout tip, stable feel, but there's more stability through the lower half of the shaft. It's not overly harsh on the grip end. What is interesting with the whiteboard, when we first got it in, we thought they'd changed the profile completely and even balance point between the stiff flex and the X. The X and the TX had a more even, what felt like a more even balance through, and then the stiff flex had more tip balance. What it actually turned out was that the butt section, the kind of the grip end, the higher part of the shaft there, is much softer in the softer flexes, and as you go up into the X and the TX, the butt end ramps up in terms of stiffness. So the whiteboard in the stiffest flex is really stable, but doesn't swing as heavy. VF, if you take the VF6 and the whiteboard 63, whiteboard 63, 62 to 65 grams, VF is up nearer the 70 gram mark, so it swings a little heavier. But hope that answers the question. David Talon, thanks Simon. Thank you, David, thanks for the question. Ian Linford, everybody give Simon a like, his knowledge is immense. It's very kind of you. It's amazing how quickly an hour goes when you're on your own, with an iPad and a load of questions. Really, by the way, really appreciate all the questions. I mean, tonight I haven't got Stuart here just to talk nonsense with and fill time with. So your questions are so important. Your input with the channel is so important and means so much to us. So really appreciate all the questions. They've been getting so good over the last year and a half, and some of the detail, and I love when you kind of ask me really specific things because it means I can get my teeth into it. But thanks for the input. It's helping me out on my own no end. So thank you very much. Simon Muggleton, thanks for the effort. If technical advice on my SU, 100% correct. I've gone flat, so I'll look at swing plane. Yeah, and that can get the face destabilized as well. It's so easy to get hands and arms taking over because small muscles like getting involved, but they tend to screw things up. So the more you can bring it back to your core and your bigger muscle groups, let them take charge, and that should just help kind of set that plane a little steeper, and that should stabilize the face as well. And then one more question from Simon Muggleton as well. Is that a mid-handicap iron that is traditional lofts, or are they all stronger lofted these days? Is there a mid-handicap iron? A lot of stronger lofted now because there was just this distant, it's basically a launch monitor, race to the bottom in terms of spin. So when one brand went stronger loft, everyone had to. Now, yes, there's more weight and tungsten in the sole of the club, which launches them higher, but if you move CG lower, you gear spin off. So when you went from a six irons used to be 33 degrees when back in the old days when I started playing, and now some of the 24, 25, which is my old 4-iron. And that was an old 3-iron back in the day. So, and then we wonder why people can't hit long irons. So a lot of the mid-handicapper or the kind of more forgiving options are stronger lofted. There are some, if you take the HL models, the 925 HL Mizuno, it's a little bit of a bigger head, but that's at least the 6-irons back up at 28 degrees. There is a head coming from Titleist that is forgiving with a higher loft. So keep a lookout for that. It'll be later in the year. It is in addition to the line that's coming. It's a slightly lighter weight head as well, but there will be a forgiving, much more traditionally lofted iron head coming. I mean, sometimes, ping with the 230s, you can retro the loft and get the 6-iron back to 30 odd degrees. Otherwise, you're looking at T100s and things to try to get the loft up there. But yeah, you do sometimes have to compromise a little bit on head size in order to get some flight. Or actually, you just ignore the number that's on the bottom and say, right, the 7-irons are 30-degree head. I'm going to treat that as my 6-iron. And sometimes you can get the specs to work, but it's a little bit more complicated. But it is a big challenge in the industry. It's something that we've been banging on at them for years to get a forgiving head with loft, and it's coming, but there aren't many options out there, I'm afraid, which is poor form in the industry, I think. Mizuno did a study, said 50% of golfers need more flight. Well, it's only happened because they've turned lofts down. So give us some more lofted, more forgiving heads brands. That's what we all want. Eric Wallace. Hi Simon, do you see as large of a difference between stock and aftermarket hybrid shafts versus the difference between the wood/driver shafts? Is it worth upgrading, or are the stocks usually good enough? Any stock shaft is good enough if it suits you. And that is the bottom line. Yes, the materials are more consistent when you go to aftermarket shafts. They're higher grade, the tolerances are tighter, and they allow you to do more with the design. Yet when you go into a driver head, the heads are bigger, and an off-center hit, a higher grade shaft, reduces how much deformation you get at impact. So the gearing is reduced, and therefore the dispersion and the spin spread can be reduced as well. So that's why, as Eric said, you get bigger differences in the driver for certain. But ultimately, if the weight and the balance of the shaft and the way the club swings for you is suitable in a stock shaft, be it a driver, fairway, hybrid or irons, then it's the right shaft for you. And that's really, fundamentally, that's the key point. There are hundreds of aftermarket shafts. Hybrids, the one thing I would say with hybrids, they are, and have been over the years, and I don't know why, I can't think of a reason in physics that makes this the case, but they are the most sensitive to little changes in weight and balance of any club in the bag. As I say, I can't make sense of why it's the case, because it's not, drivers surely should be, it's the lightest shaft on the longest length with the most acceleration rate. It should be drivers. It's not hybrids. They're fiddly to fit sometimes, and really tiny changes in dead weight or balance point can be what makes or breaks them. So the answer is a stock shaft, if it suits you, is absolutely going to be the best option. However, there might well be something out there that's if you can test and make an informed decision and say, actually, this stock shaft's great, we'll stick with it, that's the best way to do it, or actually find there's an aftermarket shaft that helps you time it and strike it more consistently, then depending on what price you want to pay for it, because there are some pretty big variables. The upside with hybrids is iron shafts. Graphite iron shafts work well in them. So potentially one of those, you could be looking at if we're going to do it in pounds, but kind of potentially kind of 50 or 60 pound to 100 pound upgrade cost rather than 100, 200 for some of the dearer hybrid shafts. That can be a really good value way of doing it as well. The head weight suits the iron shaft, so that we're often using iron shafts in hybrids. So, but ultimately test them and see how good the performance is. If there's a noticeable change, then potentially there's value in it, and if not, great, stock shaft is the one to keep in it, and it costs you less. Tony Bythway, brilliant as ever, Simon. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Best Equipment channel on YouTube. Very kind indeed, and we will certainly wear that gladly. The left rough, if you couldn't play your mirrors, what iron head would you go for? Or You see, I'm a bit of a tart. I like something a bit different. So if I couldn't play my Miuras, so I like something that is a little bit different. I like something a little bit niche, but equally speaking, I just want something that's going to feel as good as possible and give me as much consistency as possible. So actually learning a bit more about the backstory to things like the Itaboris, maybe some of the Orion heads, I'd be drawn to some of those because they are a little bit niche. The only question is head weights or whether they work for me. Of mainstream brands, I really like the feel of the S3s. They're a really nice head. The Strixons, I like to hit them well, but they may be a little low spin for me. Yeah, I'd probably kind of like the idea of the S3s, but I'd need something more forgiving at the top end of the set. It's just something, I think they're a really nice, simple, clean looking head. The beveling on the sole shape's nice. But the honest answer is I like pretty things and something a bit different. So I'd probably go something Japanese. Chris Johnson, hi Simon, do you find the GT3 driver left biased? Just seemed to turn over really easily with me compared to a couple of friends' GT2 and QI35 core. Thought it would be the opposite, to be honest. It is not a draw biased head, but further to what one of the questions earlier was about back weight and lessening that back weight, you might really need the weight back on the head to help gear the face open. So whereas for me, it suits me playing a weight forward head. For you, it could really suit having the weight back. The GT3 is absolutely not a draw biased head. If the club setup's wrong, then that will create a draw. But if you've been able to test the same shaft in a GT2 and that is straighter for you and doesn't go left, then the only reason could be that that weight at the back helps to open the face a little bit more in transition and hold it a bit more through impact. So that would be the reason, but certainly not a bias within the head. It's about as neutral a head as you're going to find from that point of view. Andy, I tell you, done well to just get Andy as a handle. I was fitted for steel fibre in T200s. I struggle with pitch wedge to 8. 7 to 5 are great. Would you suggest a different shaft for pitch wedge to 8 iron? Now, the question I would ask you is whether you've got the parallel tip steel fibres or the constant weight. Reason being that parallel tip, it's a unitized shaft, and then the shafts, it is a blank shaft, and then the same shaft goes in all the irons. But as you go to short irons, you're trimming more off it and it gets lighter. If you've got the constant weights, then what that means is you have a 4 iron shaft, 5 iron shaft, 6 iron shaft, 7 iron shaft, 8, 9 pitch shaft, as you do in 90% of the steel shafts. And what happens is they get progressively a little heavier. So as you trim off them to get the lengths down, the weight maintains. So my guess is that you've got the parallel ones and they're a descending mass set. Unfortunately on the steel fibers, some of them have a CW on the markings on the shaft. I'm going to get a couple to show this, and some don't. So actually, to know which ones you've got can be quite tough. So we test all our shafts in our demo bat are the constant weights, and as you can see here, the 110 has a little CW on it. I'll go a bit closer. Has it got my eyes? There we go. There's a little CW on the shaft. I never knew my eyes were so alluring, which means constant weight. I'll get out of the way. And then this one, down. Better? Further away. Whereas this one doesn't have it. They are both constant weights. You can tell there's a little kind of band at the grip end that either has a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 number on it, or it doesn't. So if it's got the number of the iron on, then it's the constant weight. But my guess is that it probably isn't based on what you've described. They are a great shaft, but if you get the constant weights, we would always build with those here for that very reason. So if you can find that out, then that would explain whether what I think the likely issue is. Now where are we? Peter called out. Peter, how are you, sir? Hope you're well. Just back playing again. It's great to hear. Back playing again after a few issues, but struggling with my fitted hybrid TSR1 with a Vista Pro 60S. Starting to get a flight with the swing speed of Prox 77. Any advice? I'd have to check what the settings are. Drop me an email. I have a little look over the specs and check where the swing speed was when we tested it, and I will let you know. I'm out of office tomorrow morning, but fire me an email with just saying hybrid, and that will remind me, and I will have a little look into it for you, and I'll email you back. Mike T, hi Simon, do you change swing thoughts when playing off baked out hard fairways? Generally, no. For kind of iron shots and things, no. The only thing I might change slightly when it's really wet, just to try not to go too deep. But off firm fairways, I love firm fairways, just pinching it off them. So generally speaking, no. Wedge shots are where I might. So I quite like a firm fairway because I can kind of drive the ball into it and pinch it against it and fizz it out a bit lower. I hate wet fairways with wedges, especially up slopes. I just fat them. I'm not a good wedge player. But for generally speaking, no, I don't. But I'm not overly steep. So you're not overly steep based on what I know of your swing. So it may well be just, I would say just don't overthink it. But you're likely to get a bit more flight off a firmer fairway because the ball's got resistance. It could pitch up a little bit more. But wedge shots might be somewhere where just making sure that you're not using too much bounce. I know people love the concept of using bounce, but actually you can play into the turf a little bit more because it's not going to dig. So that would be the only place where I might think of it a little bit differently. I would imagine South Arts is pretty firm at the moment. How are we doing on time now? Great. Ian Linfoot, have you fitted a player with driver yips? Would trying to reduce one side of the course help them? Not full-blown yips. It's an interesting one. I think if there are driver yips, then you'll kind of just try and find a way of getting them off the tee. We've got the mini drivers, we might well go to that to allow someone to play it more like a fairway would. I think if someone's got driver yips, that's not necessarily something a fitting can help because actually it's as much mental as physical. You're just trying to find a way of someone not thinking about the swing. So it would depend on what their action is as to what you do with the clubs. But right now, I'd probably go to make the shaft as short as I can, which would then, with the mini drivers that are out there now, I might well go to something like that R7 mini driver and get them playing it like a fairway wood or playing it. You can trap that and you can play it more like an iron. With the weights in that head, you can actually get them pretty short. So that would be a route I would be most likely to go. But I wouldn't, it depends what they were able to do with the swing. If they're going to work on the swing and try and get out of them, then I wouldn't want to fit something as a sort of a sticking plaster. But so in a few layers to it, but there are now more options open to us than ever before because of the mini drivers for that. Golf Nerd, thanks. I just had a look on the website. GT1 uses a stock shaft with a 335, it's 335, not 355, yeah, 335 tip. TSR1 hybrid also uses the speed mesh, it's 335. If using 0.37 for these heads, do you have to remove material? I'd have to double check with the workshop to make sure I'm not stating a kind of a false fact here, but you should be able to get a Titleist 370 sleeve to go into them. I think the hybrid adapters are the same dimensions, but they just have a specific 335 one for those heads. But the main body of the adapter, I'm 99% sure is the same shape as the 370 one. So just get one of the other adapters and put it into that head and should be good to go. Matt M, hi Simon, down for fitting with Mark tomorrow. I was wondering what the lead time for hybrids is roughly at the moment. At the moment, we have to quote roughly 4 weeks as a completion lead time at the moment. For individual clubs, it may be a little bit less, but it's responsible for us to give you a very realistic lead time. Some of the brands are, if they've had a really successful period, are struggling a bit. I think you've got Titleist, Ping have got new launches coming, so that where they prioritize the new products can push lead times slightly. But generally speaking, within 4 weeks would be where we'd quote for, but we'd always try and deliver as quickly as we can. But that's a realistic time frame, but less if we can do it. Lee Roberts, hey Simon, keep up the good work. Very kind. Thank you very much indeed. Voice hasn't gone croaky yet, which is a good thing. Left rough, last one from me. We're adding 2 degrees of loft to a ZXi7, kick the flight up as high as ZXi5 in the long irons. Yeah, it should do. I think there's the only thing would be what happens to ball speed. ZXi5 will get you more ball speed, but won't spin as much. So adding the loft to the ZXi7 will launch it. Obviously gives you more loft, so it's going to put a degree or so of launch angle on, but will spin it more so that it's going to get a bit more peak height. ZXi5 will launch higher, but will spin less. So depending on what you're trying to achieve, if the strike's consistent, the ZXi7 will land a little steeper because they're going to spin more. But then the ZXi5 will be longer because it's got lower spin, it's more efficient through the air. So it depends what you're trying to achieve, but yes, it should peak out a little higher, all things being equal, partly launch angle, but the spin's going to be a big element of that. Lee Roberts, what are your thoughts on the driver tip multi-adapters allowing you to change heads on your favorite shaft? I assume you mean things like the Unifit adapters of Top Golf do, some of the kind of the Unifits, we use one for our testing here. I think if you're I think if you're someone who likes to tinker around with heads, then it does give you that option. It's just making sure that head weights stay the same. But yeah, look, if it means not having to buy multiple shafts and multiple tips. It's a better way of doing it. It's the best way of doing it if you have that kind of inclination. You might well have a low spin bomber of a driver and a more reliable sort of higher spin, higher flighted one that you just go flip between. If that's the way you play, then yeah, that gives you that option and you've only got to get one shaft. So yeah, totally for that, for sure. The left rough, T100 is probably the best I've hit a 4-iron at 24 degrees, so would like a crack off the ZXi7 4-iron at 24 degrees to see. Yeah, I think it's still, ZXi7 should still spin a little bit less, yeah, and you'd have to add that bit of loft to it, but yeah, should be a good one for flight. The Aaron, can you please compare DM on a Whitebird versus Ventus Black? Thank you. I will whip through very quickly and do that. Let's see. Lee Roberts, keep pressing the wrong button. Thanks, Lee. Yes, constant weights fitted. So it may well be that actually with those, you might just need the swing weight increasing a bit in the shorter irons. So let us know, pop in, we'll have a check of it and make sure we don't do something more than we actually need to. Golf, no, would you rather play golf with your wife or James? Well, my wife doesn't play golf, so definitely James. Let me get the driver and the whiteboard and the Ventus Black.
Glad he said golf rather than play around.
Very good point. I wouldn't have
Thank
picked
you,
that up.
Golf
But
Nerd
yes. We're close, but we're not that close. Let's grab the whiteboard from next door. Righty-ho. So, let's whip these together. So I'll start with the whiteboard. I've got the X in both of them, because they were the ones to hand. What's to put this together? Thoughts on TPI and what they're doing? Thinking about going that route, and are we thinking about going that route in the future? I mean, what they're doing with TPI is great. I think going over each aspect of the game. I mean, it's very much from Titleist point of view, but it's a structure from the fitness point of view, mobility, and covering all elements. I think it's a brilliant thing. It's something that we already do. We have Kate, who's TPI certified, who's our PT and resident global level athlete. We've got the coaches upstairs. We've got Stuart Robinson, who does bar mechanics and injury prevention, and we've got the fitting side of things. So we actually have each of those covered off, and we're in an environment where everyone can communicate. So I think that's something that we do already do, but obviously they have a place out in the States where there's a kind of a huge resource there. But I think it's brilliant, and it's actually, you know, it's complete solutions rather than just sticking plasters. So, right, I'll start with the whiteboard. So whiteboard, a little bit less heavy than the Ventus Black, quite a stable, stout feel. I'd say when we get into the stiffer flexes, really ramps up the stiffness in the grip, and I've hit that right off the top. Forgot that the tee was higher than I normally play. Let me give that one more, because that's not going to tell us anything. It's not a shaft that you get a lot of feel out of, certainly in the stiffer flexes. So if you like something really kind of tight playing and not overly heavy, then the whiteboard's a great shaft. You know, so very stable down the ball, very nicely kind of tightly connected through the swing, very crisp all the way down. You know, for someone who's more of a hitter and likes to feel like the club's staying with them, great shaft. Sort of switch to the Ventus. Now the Ventus Black is that little bit heavier, so We're at 64, 65 grams in the whiteboard. Then we get up to 66, 67 in the Ventus Black, but the balance point is a little bit further down the shaft. And actually, I think the second gen, this Velocore Plus version, definitely is more responsive feel. It's a little less harsh in the grip end, and just get a little bit more play in it versus the whiteboard, but some of that is feeling the bottom end a little bit more. Still very, very stable. But you get there's a bit more to hit against in the bottom end. You get a little bit more feedback through the handle. Both really good shafts. The extra dead weight and weight to hit against in the bottom end will suit some players more, and the more evenly balanced weight and slightly lighter dead weight in the whiteboard will suit other players some more. Both really stable. Both went within about a yard of one another, but they require slightly different timing. So how are we doing on time? Right, 7:01. So I'm just going to finish off with, I've got these last, well, two and a half from the left rough and Paul Clanner, and then that'll be us for the hour. So instead of my constant tinkering, this is the left rough. I think I'll just book a flight to the UK for later in the year to see you guys for a set of irons. Well, we would love to see you. And maybe change your handle name because you won't see that quite as much. Paul Clanner, in an effort to understand my swing, I ventured on the TrackMan and selected the swing angle. Could you quickly give an overview swing your 7-iron? Was that something that requires more time? Though it's on a different screen and setup, but that's probably maybe one for when Stuart's back as well, probably more relevant to him. And so, yeah, but something, fire it in earlier on in another one, we'll definitely have a look at it. And a very quick last one, JD, how often can you reshaft an Axiom iron shaft into multiple heads, assuming replaced by a professional builder? I've heard of excessive Axiom breakage at hosel and not sure is for this reason. I think any shaft, particularly a composite, you can do it a couple of times, but I'd be slightly nervous of chopping and changing and chopping and changing. No matter how good the club builder is, you having to warm the glue up and you break the glue bond every time you do it. Now, any of these tips, the layers of graphite and composite are bonded together. So what you will risk is you will risk delamination. You will risk a little bit of damage in the tip. So I would always say as few times as you can. You can get away with it a couple of times, I would say, but any more than that, you are risking damaging the tip because of the amount of stress, heat stress that goes on the tip. So avoid it as much as you can, especially if you spent that much on some iron shafts. So thank you again for all the questions. Really great questions, some lovely, lovely stuff to get my teeth into, and I hope that's given you some great answers today. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed it, check out all the videos. There's some coming to follow up on some of the questions that you've asked today. So check out what's coming out. Obviously, we've got the Open coming in a couple of weeks. There'll be some interesting, hopefully, we think interesting content coming out regarding that. But thanks for joining us. Really appreciate all the questions. Hopefully it won't just be me next time, and that you'll have some swing questions to bounce off Stuart as well, hopefully when he's back from his trip. But thanks for joining us. Have a great week. Enjoy the very hot sunny weather the first half of the week here in the UK. And wherever you are in the world, enjoy your golf, and we'll see you again next week.